Next we will talk about translations. So analysis services has a feature called translations. A translation is nothing but translating to a different language. So for example, let us say the business or the customer is customers are distributed across the globe. That means we have um, um, across geography users. So some users from China, some users from UK, Japan and all, and the users are not familiar with English. Okay, like Chinese users may not be more fluent with the English. So this feature is nowadays I don't think it's basically a useful feature because everyone knows English, but if there are clients or users who does not know English, and if you want to show the data in their own language, we use translations. Okay, translations enable us to show the data in different languages. By default it uses the language whatever we chose. Okay, this Visual Studio by default picks up English, and whenever we are building a dimensions we are picking English columns, right. When we say month name, we always pick English columns for dimension attributes. So depending on attributes we picked, the cube shows that particular language, but you will have the option to change to a different language depending on the user base. Okay, you can do that using translations. So if you want to create translations, you go to the cube and click on translations tab. Okay, and in the translations tab, if you want to create a new translation, you can say new translation. Okay, so I have an example where we can try creating some translations, couple of languages. So the first one I want to try is French Belgium. And again, when we want to implement translations, first thing is you need to have data. Without data you cannot do anything. You need to have that particular language related data in the database. If we don't have the data, we cannot implement this one, translations. Okay, so but before that I want to show the data, how we have the data. For example, if I go to date, and if you look at the schema, we have columns called English, right, English day name of the week, Spanish day name of the week, and French day name of the week. So like this we need to have data in different languages, then only we can implement translations. So Visual Studio or analysis services does not create data for us. The only thing what analysis services is doing through translations is showing a respective column value. Okay, instead of showing the default value, it shows a different language value from the SQL column. Okay, so that's why we need to have the data available in the database, the translated information. Okay, so since we have Spanish and French, I will try to create Spanish and French translations. So I go to translations in the cube. So the first thing I want to do is create new translation, and this is going to be French Belgium. Click OK. And for these dimensions and measures, I want to write French related strings or French related names. So for internet sales, the French word is this one. So I got these words from internet, so I don't know French, just to let you know. And then Spanish Spanish, that is another translation I have, and the word for the title for the fact internet sales is that one. And similarly, order quantity is called French quantity of order, I guess. So, and then sales amount is called this. So, I filled up all the translated words here, names for each measure and dimension. I have put different languages. Okay. So, now I will save it. So far I want to test this one. So, I will deploy it to the server and then browse it and see. Refresh, and here language is default. Default is whatever the default language we picked and default members we picked in the dimensions and measure groups. But here you will have option to pick your appropriate language. So, depending on which language we are supporting, users will pick that particular language. So, French Belgium we are supporting. So, I pick French Belgium, and the moment I pick French, the moment I pick French, I see the dimension names change it to that particular language. So, if you observe what analysis services is doing, is using that new names instead of the default names. So, that is all it is doing, replacing the name with the new perspective translation related names. Similarly, if I go to the measures, you see the different names here: internet sales, calculations, whatever sales amount, quantity, product cost. These are all the language specific names. Similarly, if I go to Spanish, Chile, so I see a different naming convention here. Okay, like this. Now, so far we changed the titles, but if you look at the actual values, if you look at the actual values, the month name still is in English, because we haven't generated or we haven't configured any translations for the actual members of the dimension, right. We just configure translations for the names. So, that is why only names are showing in corresponding language, whereas the members are actually showing in different members are showing in default language. So, to configure translations at the member level, we need to set up the translations at the dimension level, so that analysis services can know which column should be used for which member. Okay. So, I will go to the date first to set up the translation, and here also I click on translations and I will say new translation, and I pick Belgium, not Belgium, French Belgium, click OK, and here so once I create this new translation, I need to see, as I was saying, for which members we have the translation information available. So, that you can see from the schema. So, in my case I have the translation for month name, English month name, Spanish and French month name. So, I can use the translation for month name members, month name attribute. Okay, I will go to translation and I will say for the month, I will click on the month here and click on this button to pick the appropriate translated value. So, French, I want to pick French month name. Okay. So, that is the value that is going to be used when we select French as the language. Similarly, I will create another translation for Spanish, Chile, and here again I will click on this, go to the column list and I pick Spanish month name, and remaining all will remain same because I do not have the translated columns for quarter and all. Okay, I will leave it as is. So, that is done for date dimension. Now, I want to do the same thing for geography as well, because I have the translated values columns for geography. So, I have English country region name, Spanish and French values for country region. So, I can do translation for country region. I will go to the translations, click on new translation and say French Belgium, click OK, and here country region name I will pick French country region name. Okay, and also I will create another translation for Spanish Chile, and I will go ahead and pick the Spanish country region name. City, do I have something for city? No, I do not have. So, we need to have the supporting translated data to work with the translations. So, like this I can set the translations at the member level, dimension levels. Okay. This country region is actually a level, okay, or it can be an attribute. So, once I set this up, I am done. So, I have to set up the translations at the dimension level to show the translated data for individual data or individual members, and at the same time I have set the translation at the cube level to show the titles, the names in a appropriate language or corresponding language. Okay. Now, I will say deploy. So, it is deploying and processing. Once deployment and processing is done, I can go on browse the cube, refresh. Now I selected Spanish. For month I do not have a value, but so when I pick month, I see the Spanish names, September, Mayo, Junio, or whatever. Okay. So, similarly, if I go to French, measures and month, I get different month names. Okay. So, like this we can use translations to convert the language or convert the data into appropriate language depending on the customer. So, now what happens when I create a report, what I can do for the users in Belgium or the users in Chile, I can preset the language saying that for these users browse the cube using this language mode. So, then what happens when users open the reporting tool, they by default see their own language in the cube. So, that is how that makes more user friendly for the non-English users. Okay. So, similarly, let us say cube is built in Belgium, right. So, they will be familiar with Belgium language, but if we are the customers who don't know Belgium, we want to see the cube in English language. So, then they can enable translations and give us the cube with the default as English. So, then we can see English. So, that is how a same cube can be browsed by multiple geographies to see the same data or to consume the data. Okay. So, that is translations, and translations were used earlier, as I was saying, long back, maybe 10 years back. We were using translations, but I never saw the requirement to use translations in recent days, because nowadays English is popular everywhere and everyone knows English, at least the data wise, right. So, that is about translations, but analysis services enables us to create the translations within the cubes.